Okay, so we are live. Welcome to the third webinar in the Lunch with Ladies Who Launch series. It's really more of kind of an afternoon coffee, or maybe almost you're going into tea time. We are super concerned about this unprecedented crisis and the impact that it's having on small businesses, and in particular for women. We know that you all don't get the same financing as men, and that means you don't have the buffer that you need when your business potentially goes to zero overnight. And these are really unprecedented times. Our topic today is finance, and you're about to hear from two incredible leaders on what actions you could or should be thinking about as you make your way through COVID-19 and think about your business, and really about carrying water to the other side of this desert and getting back to what will be our new normal, hopefully, in the next few months. I actually listened to a webinar this morning, which was all about China and really hearing the path that China has taken. And I thought it was interesting that China had a good milestone yesterday. They had no deaths from coronavirus, but that's the first time since January. But if you think about when they went into lockdown, kind of January timeframe through to now in early April, we could be looking certainly at another couple of months of shelter in place. So certainly a time when we need to be creative about our businesses. So with that, I wanted to bring two panelists into the webinar who I thought would have a lot to tell us and a lot that we can learn from. Let me welcome first Tishaura Jones, who is the treasurer of the city of St. Louis in Missouri. And you can see that great photo in the background is her wonderful son. She was the opening keynote at a Ladies Who Launch event that we did in the fall of 2018, and we just thrived on her energy. She has an amazing entrepreneurial approach to government, and for example, funded every St. Louis kindergarten student with a $50 start on their college savings account. And she did some of that funding through park meters and parking tickets. What a way to make lemonade out of lemons.
I love
that. She also had this great story of the buffalo, which we probably don't have time for the whole story, but hunkers down in the storm, but always makes it to the other side. Well, we're definitely having a buffalo moment right now. So I was happy when I remembered that story. Our second guest is Michele Romanow. Michele is a tech entrepreneur, television personality, a board director, and a venture capitalist. It's kind of amazing, all the things that she's done. She co-founded Clearbanc, a San Francisco-based provider of revenue sharing solutions that help fund online businesses and e-commerce businesses. For those of you in Canada, or maybe beyond, you probably recognize from CC's Dragon's Den. My kids love that word, Dragon's Den. They love Shark Tank, Dragon's Den, they love the whole thing. So with that, we're gonna go straight in, and I have some questions that many of you have also submitted, and we'll try to leave time for this at the end. I'm just gonna start with a quick fire for both of you. In one word, how did you wake up this morning? Tishaura.
I woke up this morning feeling a little bit sad. I know we talked before we started the webinar. We just got some really harrowing statistics from our city health department. All of the COVID-19 deaths in the city of St. Louis were African American. And we've seen trends across the country that COVID-19 has affected those who are marginalized and Black and Brown communities more, and we're starting to see those numbers in the death rates, and those numbers were unfortunately underscored in St. Louis. So I woke up feeling a little bit hopeless, a little bit helpless, but still ready for the fight, because one of the things my dad and I always say is that we live to fight another day, and we fight to live another day.
Oh, that's great. And I'm really glad to those stats too. A wake-up call for all of us. Michele, how about you? How did you wake up today?
Frazzled. I have probably worked harder in the last 3 weeks than I have my baseline's pretty high, but this has been really tough. And it's really tough because we can't quantify how big this is going to be. At least with other recessions, it's like, what's the total value of the mortgages? Like if it's all of them, okay, at least we have a bottom here. But it's just really hard to know what will happen. It's both, I think, probably the biggest health crisis we'll ever witness, and then an economic collapse on top of that. And so I think not getting overwhelmed and being like, what can I control? What can I do in my business has been a huge focus, because I have lots of moments like you where this is just, it's very heavy a lot of the time.
Yeah. It's one of the things I love most about Ladies Who Launch is it always feels very authentic.
Yeah.
And there's no like facade. And so
I actually felt this morning.
I felt very frazzled the last couple of mornings I've woken up too. So I hear you, I'm working hard.
Yeah.
So Michele, maybe I'll start with you. So on the personal side, you actually did shut down your first company, Avondale Caviar, during the 2018 crisis or the 2008 crisis.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for women who have started their companies maybe in the last couple of years and are now looking at the next 6 to 12 months? Like, what did you learn during the financial crisis that you now can kind of bring to bear to help encourage or just give strong, solid advice on?
Yeah. Look, I think it was really important. I mean, I'll just describe this story. So I'm in engineering school. I figure out that I'm going to be much better at building businesses than building bridges. And, me and two buddies from engineering are like spending all of our time brainstorming. One of us like figured out that worldwide supply of caviar was down by 95% because the world had overfished the Caspian Sea. So we did a bunch of research. We're crazy enough to graduate, say no to our job offers, and then move to the east coast of Canada and build a fishery from scratch. This is like exactly what it sounds like. Boats, fishermen, my hands knee deep in fish, like the whole 9 yards. My parents, look at your face, it's amazing. Like my parents think I'm crazy. And our thesis was right. Chefs couldn't find the product, so we were able to just, sell it off cold calls. And so it's like, I go through this phase where like everyone thinks we're crazy. We've built this business. And then I actually remember being at home at my parents' house, like the very first couple of days of 2008 where things started to crash. And I remember like my dad looking at me being like, look, we basically lost half of our net worth today. And like, you just have these like moments. And so then I spent almost the next year trying to look for other businesses to start. And we went through tons of ideas and iteration. And everyone like thinks it's so glamorous, but I mean, I was trying to sell fruit to office companies and snacks for a new thing. Like I tried to do a bunch of different stuff. And I think from that, I realized a couple of things. And then frankly, to finish the story, I ended up, getting a job as the director of strategy for a retailer. I saw e-commerce blow up. We're still in 2009. Things are not very good. And then, built a e-commerce site in Canada that became successful later. But what that experience taught me was that there are actually a lot of great things that could be built in recessions. I mean, the first rise of e-commerce, the first rise of daily deals, the iPhone was just being built on. I mean, we see this meme that's like, Airbnb and Uber and all these businesses were built during the recession, but it really is important to remember that, with a ton of creativity, I think we're going to be looking at the world very differently. I think we're going to be looking at health in a totally different way after this than we probably ever have before in a variety of different ways. And so it's kind of one of those things where just like mentally, I at least have to set the expectation with myself that I need to like brace myself. Like I always think like, what are we now? Day 25 since we got work from home. I'm like, the worst is going to be like day 90 or day 100. So like, Michele, you gotta be ready. Like it's going to get harder before it gets easier. And I think, man, if it gets easier before, it's like great, but at least if not, I've mentally prepared myself for this isn't going to be another week of waking up frazzled. This is going to be, another couple months of this at the shortest.
You've definitely got to plan for the worst, and we all hope for the best. But I think for a lot of businesses out there right now, moving swiftly is important. Tishaura, give us a little bit of your perspective. So, particularly in towns and maybe smaller cities outside of the coast, what are you seeing? There's a lot of information out there right now for small businesses, but as a treasurer, right, your entire is managing finances. What are your kind of top tips and what's the key information you're sharing out there right now for small business owners?
The key information that we're sharing is how to get access to the programs available through the Small Business Administration, either the Emergency Injury Disaster Loan or the Paycheck Protection Program. So the first day that the guidance came out, we had a huge webinar with all of our affinity chambers, the Black Chamber, the Hispanic, Asian, and Bosnian Chamber, because St. Louis has a large Bosnian population, the largest in the United States outside of Serbia. And so we did a huge webinar to try to get information directly from the SBA, from our small business development corporations, to let people know what the programs were, how to qualify, and then send them the information on on where to go. And so that's the information we've been trying to get out. And then also any local grants that are available through our community foundations. We've been trying to get people the resources that they need to stay afloat, because we don't know how long this is going to last. And then on the government side, we've been in constant contact with our lobbyists, with our federal and state representatives to see what that relief package is going to look like for state and local governments, because it's important for us to also try to figure out and look at our own cash flow on a local government level to see what we are planning for, and looking at our reserves and how to plan for our losses of revenue as well. So we've been, and then just on the consumer base, just letting people know what their options are with calling their mortgage servicers or their lenders, their creditors, utility companies, letting people know that just please don't just put your head in the grass or in the sand like sometimes we do when things are overwhelming. Just trying to give people as much information as possible to make smart decisions during this pandemic.
Right, and I think you talked about your bail team. So get together do you want to tell us what your bail team is?
Yeah, I got this from my good girlfriend, Darcella. She was one of my first webinars because she is the CEO of the Veterans Business Resource Center. And she came up with this acronym called BAIL team. So your banker, your accountant, your insurance agent, and your lawyer. Get your BAIL team together, talk to all of the people on your BAIL team, and to see what your picture is, to see what you need to do next and what are your next steps.
And in terms of some actionable things, how are you telling people to talk to folks like your creditors, like your landlord, the utility supplier? Like how should they deal with kind of those incoming bills right now that are starting to pile up?
Well, I'm telling people to be honest with them. These are people that you should already have an established relationship with. And then given the current environment, I think they're expecting calls like this. So for example, the treasurer's office, not only am I responsible for the finances of the city, I also the office also owns some buildings, and we have commercial tenants. So we sent out a letter to all of our commercial tenants that say, hey, we're here for you. Just let us know what you need. And some of them have already responded with extending their lease and letting them go 3 months without rent. You never know what you're going to get unless you ask for it. Like my mother always used to say, a closed mouth never gets fed. So you have to speak up and let people know what your situation is and what your circumstances is, and you'll be surprised how willing they are to help.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I've heard from brands over and over again as I talk to them with my Nextdoor business, is they really want to make sure SMBs survive, because frankly, they realize that's their customer base. And so if they're not around, their business is not going to be around. So I've been really pleased to hear big brands, like big utility players, big, suppliers of like your internet and so on, are actually willing to wait and maybe even have some free offerings. But again, get out there and ask. Don't be reticent at all. Right. Michele, Clearbanc provides capital to e-commerce brands. So, in some ways, maybe a sector that's doing better, certainly, than those that might be more brick and mortar retailers. Tell us a little bit about that landscape. And so what are you seeing in terms of the people who are doing well on e-commerce and why? And is there something that even businesses that maybe hadn't embraced e-commerce to the same degree pre the crisis might actually be able to learn right now and act on?
Yeah, no, I think, businesses go through so many iterations. And when we started Clearbanc, one of the categories we were funding was actually a lot of folks that had Airbnb properties. And so I think about that, like we would have 2 years ago, I mean, this company would have been totally, totally different. And so I think what we're seeing across the e-commerce sector, things are pretty stable. And in some categories, things are growing. I mean, certainly as everyone has effectively had to go home and not leave their house, a lot of folks have learned to buy on the internet where they haven't done that. I mean, I think my parents ordered their groceries online for the very first time in their life last week, and I took them through how to do this. And I think that's certainly what we saw in China, is that there was, a kind of a real surge in especially some categories. I think there is still, like, I just don't want to get ahead of anything. There's so much uncertainty in the space still. We are uncertain on the Chinese recovery, and, we get most products from China. And so if there is an issue in supply chains, we're going to have a major issue on, e-commerce brands being able to sell those products. I think that's still to be seen. I think we're seeing things do well in the essentials right now. If you're buying food online, if you're buying anything for children, now that schools have basically been canceled, we've seen those categories do really well. Even fitness and home. And then I think the rest is, we see also there's e-commerce companies that have touched the categories that are not doing well today, travel and events. And so I think, how we're advising companies to think about this is certainly trying to look for the sectors that are going to grow in this time. And there's a lot more research being published around that. And I mentioned some of that. I think also one of the very interesting, I wish I had a screenshot of this. So someone showed this to me in China, is they told everyone to go home. They were very, very strict about it. And so there were all of these folks that either sold products or fruits or vegetables in malls or in street markets. And they effectively took to a platform that kind of looked like Instagram. But like, I watched a video for almost 5 minutes on how to make a salad with a radish. And like, they're really like, it was pretty amazing. And I was like, okay, so this is a little bit of at least the shift. What happened in China is, okay, I can no longer sell radishes at the street market. How do I figure out how to do this now on the internet? And I'm certainly not suggesting that's the whole solution, but I think we're going to see a lot of creativity around, that right now.
Yeah, that hyperlocal. We see on our platform people bartering. I just saw a hyperlocal mat for sourdough proving or yeast or something.
The sourdough starter, I think.
Thank you. I knew I was getting it wrong, but I'm like, wow. I think something I read earlier that really resonated with me was, even if you don't have a product right now that can be sold, like, I don't know, you cut hair.
Yes.
Don't have the first time you talk to your customers be when we're getting back together again, whatever that new norm is. Like, talk to your customers through this. And there might just be that little spark of something else that you can do in the midst of this. Like, maybe it's even, showing people how to cut their husband's hair at home, which I could probably do a video on.
It's exactly that. Like, as much as this is a tough and a huge amount of anxiety to be in kind of this moment in the world, like, there's a lot of new things that we can learn and build to be set up. Like, all we know for sure is this won't go on forever. And so exactly that, being ready for whatever that next thing, and using this as a platform to, if you cut hair, it's like, why don't I teach you some great things on, stories, or like reaching out to people in different ways.
Yeah, campaigning has seen a new sort of switch as well.
Right.
We're in the middle of, or our primary is coming up in August, and we started phone banking, and our phone bankers are not even talking about the election. Our phone bankers are calling people and saying, hey, I'm from the Treasurer's campaign, but that's not why I'm calling today. I'm calling to see how you're doing, to see if there's anything you need. Do you have any questions about what's going on? And, possibly linking people to services, because I think that that's what they need more now than anything else.
Totally.
Yeah, I think you will engender so much customer loyalty just from those types of reach outs that will, hopefully you're filling the bank for future. I want to ask you both about getting funds. So Tishaura, maybe I'll start with you. So you talked already about CARES Act, what the PPP plan was. What is it that entrepreneurs need to be aware of if they're applying for an SBA loan right now or applying for the PPP plan? Like, what do they need to get in order? And if they're having like I've talked to folks who are like, my bank won't call me back, I don't know if my application's in, what can they do next?
Well, first, on that last tip, banks are overwhelmed right now. And we have been in contact with all of the banks that the city does business with to see, where we can send people who are calling us, asking, where can we apply for SBA loans? But if you've already had your bail team intact, then your banker can help you through that. But what I would tell people is make sure you have all of your documentation in order. Because that's the first thing that they're going to ask for. They're asking for your last 12 months payroll, and they're making an average of that on the PPP. They're asking for your cost of goods sold, the things that are inherent to you doing business. Make sure you have the ability to pay. So, as you're trying to figure out how much you're going to borrow, try to figure out if you have the ability to repay this loan once it starts to become due, in case that you aren't in a situation to have it forgiven. And then work with a financial institution that you trust, which again happens if your bail team is already intact.
Right. Yeah. And Michele, on your side, are you guys still lending at the moment? Or if someone was coming to you at Clearbanc, what are some of the most important things that they can do to kind of set themselves up for the best success?
Yeah, so no, we're certainly still originating at this point. Last year, totally different year, but we invested $1 billion into 2,200 different companies. And so the folks, especially in segments that are growing right now, we're particularly interested in. But for us, it's, do you have $15,000 of monthly revenue? Have you been in business for more than 6 months? And then we can provide capital on a revenue share basis. So we'll give you a portion of capital, you pay us back from your revenue. There's no personal guarantee or fixed payment timelines or compounding interest. And so we try and make it really founder friendly, and are still putting out money in e-commerce and now the B2B space as well.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad that you're doing that. So for both of you, if you're talking to a small business, what would you have them think to do over the next 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days? So over that sort of time frame. Michele, maybe I'll just stay with you on that front, because it probably comes out a little from the folks you're talking to right now.
Yeah, I think right now, in the next 30 days, it's allowing people to breathe a little easier. So, I think there's been an enormous amount of government stimulus in both Canada and the US, and some incredible programs that the government has put forward. And so, getting the assessment of can I get those? Do I fit? What's the timeline on doing that? I think that is probably the first thing to do right now. I think the second thing is sizing up your team and your cost structure, largely on burn, to see, is this something that I can survive and for how long? And then I think, frankly, that determines your next 60 and 90 days. And then going back, as you were saying earlier, to every vendor, you would be surprised how thoughtful and forgiving landlords and utility providers and frankly, everyone has to be adapting in that new environment. And then I think after that, it's, is there some opportunities that can come out of this that are probably very different than ever before? And so I always think about the psychological safety of an entrepreneur. You need to know that you can make it at least till tomorrow and at least till next week. And so having that plan is really important. And then I think after that, starting to think about, okay, what are either some of the segments that might surge? Where can I, is there some key talent I can look at? Is there some other things that this whole market has changed? And are there some opportunities that will come from that?
Tishaura, what would you add there? That was a good.
I wouldn't add a thing. Michele covered it all. Yeah.
Maybe just looking, just generally, any other practical tips? And then I'm going to go to some questions that we have from the audience.
I would say, and this is not necessarily on the business tip, but just don't be so disappointed in yourself these are some really trying times for everyone, and everyone is approaching this in a different way. And to try to be, you know, as patient with yourself and as patient with the market, right, with our environment as you can be, because we don't know when we're going to get out of this. I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when, because, you know, we know that getting back to whatever normal is on the horizon, and also realizing that, you know, normal may not be what it was before we started this. So just having a realistic and pragmatic picture of what that will look like on the other side.
Yeah. So I'm going to go into a question that came in from the audience. So first up, someone asking, Michelle, actually is geared towards you, if that's okay. Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Not sure who's joining you. It's one of my kids joining me. But she's asking, Michelle, curious how you're advising companies to think about marketing versus cash flow right now. I've been on a few other webinars that have recommended to cut all necessary marketing spends to protect cash flow for the next 3 to 6 months. However, I'm an online business and I'm worried that if I just bunker down, I won't actually be able to sell anything. So it can become a very vicious loop, particularly in online. So what's your recommendation? And maybe I'll add on it, you know, anything that either of you have seen for more, you know, guerrilla marketing that doesn't cost a lot of dollars, but might actually get your brand out there.
Yeah, so I think that's like a very dependent question on what your costs of acquisition have been and if those have really decreased or increased during this period. You know, one of our investors was the CFO of Google. Sorry, just 2 seconds here. There's loud stuff behind me. There we go. Okay, he's one of our investors, and he reminds me that ad prices dropped on Google, you know, 20 to 30% in 2008. And so the folks that had a little bit of capital or were breaking even on that ad spend, you know, figured out a lot of good strategies during that period where things were a little bit less competitive. And so I don't think there's a clear-cut yes or no answer. I actually think it's more about, let's change the way we are messaging things today, because I mean, and we all have this reaction, like it's very tone deaf today when you're like scrolling through Instagram and someone is like showing their outfit of the day. Like, guys, we're not doing outfits right now. Like, I'm barely doing makeup right now. I'm sure all of us have pajama pants still on, and like all day long. Come on. And so I just think it's always positioning yourself so it doesn't look opportunistic, but it does look like you're being relevant today. I mean, people need very different things than they did 3 weeks ago. And so being sensitive to, I mean, even you can tell when you get I want to sell you, you know, SaaS software and it's a canned email that was used 4 weeks ago. It's like, but there is, you know, like during this environment, different things are going to be needed and different positioning is going to be needed. And so that's the way I would think about your marketing. And then how do you give back to the community at this point? I mean, that, you know, one of the things is like, we know a lot of e-commerce companies. So I think it was, you know, 2 weeks ago, ended up, you know, reaching out to one of our vendors, importing hundreds of thousands of surgical masks that we could, you know, get to hospitals and donate to hospitals, and just like using what was in our own, network to really be able to do that. But that would be the kind of question there.
Yeah. One of probably my faves I've seen, because I actually go almost every morning, is in my local community, our local donut store, which was really hurting. Will now let you buy online, $15. You can buy a set of donuts that they'll deliver directly to the hospital for all of our true frontline medical providers.
That's so amazing.
And it's such a great way to stay relevant, because they're covering their cogs so they can keep their employees employed at a very base line. They're building a brand, because like, I'm like, wow, how caring that they've taken the time to think this through. And so I think there are interesting ways that you can kind of keep the lights on, barely, doing a way where you're clearly giving back. But again, you're filling that well of what your brand stands for. Let's see. We mentioned at the beginning a little bit about our own fears, challenges. So a question maybe to you, Tishaura, how do you stay positive when it looks so challenging and hard for any leader, and particularly a local business leader?
And so funny, I do these webinars on Tuesdays and Thursdays with a different topic. And today's topic was actually mental health. How do you keep your mental health intact when it seems like everything is falling apart around you? And some of the coping mechanisms that my guests had today were just to take some time to breathe. Just, breathing 10 breaths like in and out to help you focus on what you're about to do. To give yourself time and space to concentrate on those things. And then I think one of the ways I stay positive, and this may not be for everyone, is my church is still online, and I'm able to join with hundreds of people on Facebook every Sunday morning like I would any other time, and still stay in worship. And those are the things that sort of keep me going. And to try to have something for yourself every day. Find something for you that's just for you and you alone, and don't feel bad about it. Don't feel, even if that is locking yourself away from your kids, because for those of you who are sharing an office with your kids while they are homeschooling and you're trying to do your work, just to try to find 15 to 20 minutes for yourself, because I realize that being at home with your family 24 hours a day is it can be taxing. So just and just being patient with yourself.
Michelle, what would you add there?
I love all of those suggestions. I think some form of exercise is the biggest thing. I have a stationary bike. I have never cycled so hard in my life. I'm like, I'm going to leave all of my anger and all of my grief on this bicycle right now. And it's good framing for me. And then I think the other thing is just framing myself. Like when I'm overwhelmed, I'm like, okay, Michelle, you're running a company in a crisis. You have a job to do, but like today you are not on the front lines. And like, there is just extraordinary things that our doctors and nurses are doing right now, and everyone that supports that ecosystem. And so I just try and keep that perspective as like, we're all in this together. Humanity can come together if we choose to use that lens and we choose to be a part of that lens. And it sounds like a little bit corny, but it actually isn't. It's the time where we have to remember that most, not the least, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I am with my team at Nextdoor. Before we start like a leads meeting, we got kind of our executive team, we just do a quick round the room with gratitude. We've done it for a long time. So it's not just a COVID-19 practice.
That's cool.
But I've really loved it in this moment because it allows people to be very human. Because what I find is a lot of people's gratitude are the very small things in their life. But it's the thing that makes them eminently human before we all dive into being business people again.
Yeah.
I'm going to do one more quick one, or maybe two more quick ones.
Yeah.
There was a question at the top here from someone, I'm going to paraphrase fast. We supply hundreds of small gift stores across the US and Ireland. As all of our customers are closed, we're not pursuing payments right now, but we worry if we don't reach out, they may not prioritize payments to us at a future date. Tishaura, maybe your phrase about like the open mouth doesn't get fed. So how do you balance kind of, making sure that you do get paid, but not adding to the stress of your customers right now?
I think that there's a way to just kind of make a gentle nudge. Say, hey, we realize that we are in unprecedented times at the moment, and things are very uncertain. However, we are all still in business, and we want to be helpful. So if you could let us know as soon as when you'll be able to fulfill this invoice or even a portion of it, we'd be very grateful. It's always, it's not always, what you say, but how you say it. And then, and close with like an offer, if there's anything we can do to help, just let us know. And that was kind of the letter that we sent to our tenants. We didn't say, hey, we're just going to give you 3 months of rent free. We just let them know, hey, we understand there's some things going on right now. And we're here to help. So just extending an olive branch to say, hey, call us if you need something.
Yeah. I think you need to find a balance in that one, because your business also needs to stay in business. Otherwise you won't be there for your customers. So I would definitely recommend the reach out, but I think the way you put it is exactly right. And maybe just final one for you, which someone was asking. I was about to raise money for my business. You know, should I even try, or should I just wait and see? What would you advise right now?
You know, it depends where you are in your runway. I don't think I think it's a very hard time to raise money right now. And I think it's really hard because and let's just take this in the equity context. To close an equity deal, you need a lot of momentum. And so numbers are probably in like a much different place. To get a really good deal, you need a bidding process where you have multiple people that are looking for this. And what largely creates those two things is for you to create this energy and this gravitas around why you're building something really special. And that became infinitely harder to do over Zoom or over video call. None of those things to say you couldn't do that. I'm just saying, if I was thinking about like where I would triage, I would think about, you know, let's let the market recover. Let's let this feel like a slightly less anomaly. Let's be able to show and tell a story about how, you know, we got out of this, or we're okay, or used it as an opportunity. But the fundraising process itself is like so grueling. You're left with half the tools. You know, there's both stimulus funding, and then there's options like Clearbanc available at this time. Like I would use those and focus on the operating part, which in my mind is hard enough to do right now because, you know, everything has changed. And so that's kind of how I think about, you know, fundraising in this environment, unless you were in a place where you absolutely have to go to market.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, Sarah,
So
you
maybe
have some good advice on that too. I don't know if you want to add more.
yeah,
You're underselling yourself major here. You've seen a lot of fees.
Not at all. I think what you said was spot on. I would wait too, or maybe you do something that's much more bridge financing to just get you from A to B. But yeah, I think going in for a major financing round right now, financing is so personal. And I think you really need almost that personal touch. I think that sometimes is hard to do virtually. There's a reason why in real life is also good. We always end every Ladies Who Launch panel or keynote with, what's the one action you want everyone listening to do in the next couple of days? So Tishaura, I'll pick on you first.
The one action I want everyone to do in the next couple of days is to take care of themselves. Do put something on your calendar to take care of yourself, and you just wouldn't imagine how better you're going to feel on the other side of that.
I think it's great. Michele.
I love that. Yeah, I would add to that. It's like taking care of yourself and taking care of each other right now. We've never needed each other more than that. And we are in this incredible dichotomy where, you know, if parents are with their children all day long, it's like, oh my God, this is too much. And then we have so many people that are living by themselves, which is like, I'm feeling this enormous sense of loneliness. And so I think it's, you know, this is like nothing to do with business. It's really like keeping yourself healthy, reaching out to the people around you, doing all of the public health things, staying home, wearing that is really the best thing we can do for one another, and the fastest way we get through this together.
Both great pieces of advice. I'll maybe close it down by saying, I'm going to steal from one of our Ladies Who Launchers in Belfast, which was the last event that we did it was crazy. It was right at the end of February. It feels like a lifetime ago. But she said, if you have experience and can mentor, if you have if you just reach out, like I would do what you both suggested, which is put a call into someone. I talked to a fellow CEO last week, female CEO in the software space, and she's not someone I would normally talk to. And it was just so cathartic actually by the end, because it's good to know that people are feeling the same thing. And if you have financial ability, really think about ways that you can reach out financially right now. There's lots of different ways that people are fundraising or giving back. Even just taking the time to find out in your local community, what are those local businesses, and can you buy some product ahead of time? I just did like a massive shop with my hair salon. I'm going to have shampoo for the next 5 years.
That's awesome.
But she didn't want a gift card. She was like, I don't want a donation. And I'm like, okay, what else can I do? And she's like, well, I've got product. And so just little things like that can help bridge cash flow. Don't forget about them. So ladies, so grateful to both of you for sharing your wisdom, experience. You've definitely given back today. Really appreciate it. And thanks for another great Ladies Who Launch webinar. Take care.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.